it became very apparent to me that there were many medical practices or companies really that were prescribing ketamine to be used at home for people alone and totally unsupported. I felt a strong desire to be in the ketamine prescribing space, but in a way where our practice only prescribes ketamine for people to work with in their therapist's office. So they're not alone going through these big challenging experiences. They're supported. And we also train the therapists. So the therapists are educated, obviously, in how to do this work. And so I was able to then utilize all of the medical licenses that I had. And I started to prescribe sublingual ketamine across the country to be used in therapist offices that were trained by us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today we have Dana Lerman in the house. Thank you so much for being with us. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And just as always, give a little context about Dana's background. So she is the founder of the Skylight Psychedelics, and she's here to talk to us about her work. And I'm really curious to dive in. So Dana, what brings you to this work? And also, where you joining us from? I can see Costa Rica on your Zoom handle.
Oh, I was in Costa Rica, but I forgot to update that. But my heart and soul are still there. So I'm in Evergreen, Colorado right now.
Wonderful. So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself and mainly what brings you to this work. So I'm really curious because we all have our personal stories and why, we kind of come into this path of the psychedelic medicines, and I'm really intrigued what brings you as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think like most people who find their way in this space, I've had my own personal journey that was very much shaped by my work with psychedelic medicines. I'm a physician, I'm a mother and a wife, and I was actually a infectious disease consultant. And so I did infectious disease for a very long time and found myself on the front lines of the COVID pandemic, which, as for everyone, that was a very challenging time. And pretty much in the middle of the pandemic, I found myself at an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica. And I had experienced psychedelic medicines before. I had some experiences with LSD when I was in high school, but I had a long hiatus until I was in my 40s and ended up in a Maloca in Costa Rica. So that experience there really allowed me to look at things from a different perspective. I had a very challenging first experience with ayahuasca. We drank medicine 4 nights in a row that particular time. And I'm always kind of shocked that I went back after that first night. That was so hard for me. But I went back and I continue to do the work with different medicines, but specifically Yahe, Colombian ayahuasca.
Okay, that's wonderful. And what is the connection with being in front lines and being a physician, and how was that for you? I can imagine, I can imagine, but I can't comprehend the pressure and the stress of it all. And just looking back at the pandemic as well and what it did for us and the unfolding since then, it's just been insane.
Yeah, I think, it's unfortunate because a lot of lives were lost, obviously, and a lot of people were hurt. And it was a time of massive isolation and disconnection, which, many would argue that we certainly did not need more of. But I really think the pandemic was a catalyst for this movement. I find that, my challenges during the pandemic were that it was my job. So this was my career, and so I had to face this at work every day, but also it never stopped, right? It was everywhere. It was my children's school, it was my friends, it was my family. I was the physician for everyone who knew me. So I never really got a break unless I was sleeping. And that, as a physician, we see trauma all day in our work, right? We go into every single hospital room and there's someone hurting there, someone suffering. And, it's more than the physical pain, it's more than the physical discomfort. And a lot of us in this space believe that a lot of the diseases that we see in people are a manifestation of unhealed trauma. And that's become much more apparent to me working in the psychedelic medicine space. So I would say, COVID, being a COVID provider, was a COVID real, practitioner and someone who was really fighting a battle every single day. That was obviously a very rewarding part of my career, being able to be there for people. But my work in the psychedelic space, as far as the rewards, have really far superseded anything that I have done to date. It's just you just see it so clearly and so quickly, and it's really it's a miracle. It's a miracle that we're able to have medicines like this on this earth, and it is a tragedy that our mother nature is incarcerated, really, and
Yeah.
not everyone has access.
Thank you for sharing, and talk to us a little bit about the birth of Skylight Psychedelics. You
Mm.
co-founded. How did that came about?
So while I was a COVID practitioner, I founded a company that provided COVID testing nationally, and I helped with business risk mitigation across the whole country. So I ended up getting a medical license in about 48 states, and I felt when I was kind of, the pandemic was kind of quieting down, and I felt drawn to the psychedelic space. I was reading a lot about it, and I learned about a course up in Boulder, a year-long psychedelic-assisted therapy training course. And I decided that I wanted a change. I wanted something new, and I was going to check that out. So I really had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I completed the course, and um, really towards the end of the course, I decided that it became very apparent to me that there were many medical practices or companies really that were prescribing ketamine to be used at home for people alone and totally unsupported. And I felt a strong desire to be in the ketamine prescribing space, but in a way where our practice only prescribes ketamine for people to work with in their therapist office. So they're not alone going through these big challenging experiences. They're supported. And we also train the therapists. So the therapists are educated, obviously, in how to do this work. And so I was able to then utilize all of the medical licenses that I had. And I started to prescribe sublingual ketamine across the country to be used in therapist offices that were trained by us.
That sounds amazing. So talk to us a little bit about what does it look like? What's the whole procedure? If somebody was to discover you, and then do you take them through a screening process, or what's the length of the treatment? Is there anything that you could share with us? If our listeners probably may even hear this for the first time, and ketamine has been I think it's legal now in most countries globally. It's becoming legal, and I know that there are lots of clinics are popping up as well.
Yes. So any client that's interested in working with us just goes to our website, Skylight Psychedelics, and they fill out a medical intake form, and we screen them based on that intake form. And if they pass that screening, then we will reach out to them and schedule a telehealth visit. So they meet with either me or one of the other practitioners, and they have a telehealth visit. And the amount of ketamine we prescribe really depends on how many sessions we feel like the client needs and how many sessions the client can afford to do with their therapist. And it's important that that they have a therapist that has done our training. And if they don't have a therapist that's done our training, then we can set them up with someone.
Sounds good. So when you say it depends on the budget, if they can afford it, and also where they are at, is there anyone that shouldn't be taking this treatment shouldn't be, or who do you say yes to, or who do you say no to? How does the process?
I would say that very rarely we say no because most people meet criteria, but there are some medical contraindications to working with ketamine. If someone has an advanced heart disease or a stroke or seizure disorder, there's a list of medical contraindications. There's also some psychiatric contraindications. If someone has acute mania, they're in a manic episode, they have schizophrenia or psychotic disorder, then we feel like that's until we have more data, because there are people that are studying that, but until we have more data, we would decline that client. And any time we decline a client, which honestly has probably happened maybe twice, it's very rare, but they get their money back. So we don't. That's just our policy. We don't believe in taking money from someone that we cannot help.
Mm-hmm. And what are the modalities that you lean into when bringing in the therapy? What kind of modalities do you bring into this to sessions?
Yeah, so what's great about this is that all of the different therapists are working with all different types of modalities, even EMDR, and it really feels like most modalities are very helpful to bring into this space, and at different times of the journey. Sometimes if someone's doing body work, then it probably makes sense to do it more towards the end of the journey than when someone is deep into the medicine, when they're feeling disconnected from their body. So we really feel like most, if not all, modalities of therapy can be very helpful in this space. We have people doing hypnosis, like I said, EMDR, some body work. It's really an interesting it's an interesting space, and I feel like a lot of the psychedelics lend to that as well. There are a lot of people with different therapy backgrounds who are working with other psychedelic medicines, and that has been really helpful. I also feel like internal family systems is one of the therapeutic modalities that really complements all psychedelic work, whether you're in the medicine experience or for integration, and even also for the preparation time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And some of our listeners probably be very familiar with the IFS. Do you use this modality, or have you trained, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I took an IFS training course. I also have my own IFS therapist that I've been working with for 4 years. And so I've seen firsthand how it's just it's so helpful. It is psychedelic. And I know that there are people who are doing courses now that are combining psilocybin training with IFS and showing people how those can really work together for the client.
What do you think it makes it a good modality? Because I am seeing it now more and more. People are drawn to it, and there's a lot of trainings. And I have seen the founder also speaking and collaborating with a lot of psychedelic people and facilitators and retreats. So that's really interesting, actually. It's coming in
Yeah.
full force.
Yes, Dick Schwartz actually trained my therapist. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky to have someone who was trained by him. It's a phenomenal model. It makes so much sense. It speaks so clearly to me. And I love using that language. I find it incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. And would you say there are common threads with the psychedelic experience to the modality? I think that's probably why you called it psychedelic, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it gives your parts a microphone. It gives your parts a microphone, and some of them really grab that microphone, and they haven't been heard from in a really long time. And it's beautiful, and it's just, I just think it allows people to really learn about themselves and the different parts of them, and why these parts are there and what they're doing, and how they're all really working for us just to keep us safe and to keep us happy and liked. And it's a real, I mean, Dick Schwartz, it's just such an amazing job with IFS. It really is revolutionary.
Yeah, yeah, fully agree. So, looking at the work that you're doing, what are your thoughts on, there's a lots of conversation around should it be clinical, or, should it be indigenous way of working? And I'm sure, as you said earlier, you've had your experience with ayahuasca, yahe, which I believe it's more like a indigenous sort of approach and setting. So what are your thoughts? Because there's now lots of conversations around which should be the best approach for us in the world. What are your thoughts on that?
I love this question because there's so much conversation around this. And I find that, in the psychedelic medicine space, I think that all the medicines are obviously different. They all have their own unique background, and ketamine and MDMA are kind of in the more pharmaceutical background, but or they are, right? They're pharmaceuticals, but it doesn't mean that intention and ceremony and setting and all the things that we care about in the psychedelic space, those should not be omitted from that environment. And it's less happening, I think, with MDMA. Obviously, there's a huge underground of MDMA providers. I think it's less likely to happen in that space. But with ketamine, you see all these ketamine practices that are opening up. And I have a lot of clients who were traumatized in these clinic spaces and come for ketamine to do with their therapist to work through that trauma. So leaving someone alone in a non-ordinary state of consciousness couldn't be further from what I feel like we're trying to accomplish here, right? We're trying to foster that connection with themselves and to trust themselves, but also the container, and trusting the therapist and that alliance and that relationship, and trusting in the medicine. And I think that right now what's happening in the ketamine space is it's the Wild West. It is the Wild West. There's so many different things that are happening in the ketamine space. But unfortunately, I just hear too many times that people are spending at least minimum of $500 to sometimes over $1,000 for one session where you go in, they check your vital signs, they give you a dose of ketamine. Some of the places are turning on a nature show for you to watch and sitting you up in a lazy boy chair. Some of them are allowing or suggesting you listen to a podcast. Or, I mean, it really couldn't be further from what seems like so intuitive, because you're trying to promote this connection with yourself. And if you're listening to a podcast, right, it's kind of just using it as it's more like that the way that they're working with that medicine is more kind of trying to foster, I think, this like very medicalized model where it's like, neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, and less so about connecting with your own inner knowing. And that's what, when our clients ask us how ketamine works, that's the first thing we lead with. It's really trying to promote that connection with your inner knowing.
Yes, I really believe that. And thanks for speaking to that, because the way that I understand it, because I've been following Professor Dolan, from the John Hopkins, she's kind of like, for me, one of the louder voices in the front. She is in the front lines of the research, and what she talked about, the metaplasticity of opening the critical periods on psychedelic experiences. I believe, what I understand, that you can't just open the critical periods and then leave the person to their own device. I think that critical window requires holding. Maybe there's going to be some conversation that needs to be happening, maybe some release or something else. So more like a process-led, but also giving a meaning and intentional direction. Sort of in that, I think if there's a neurogenesis, then you're giving your cells a reason to rewire in the most optimal way, right? So leaving someone in their own space and on their own process, I think I agree, it's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you look at some of the old school perspectives, Terence McKenna times, you just take a high dose, like a hero dose, and go in a dark room. But maybe back then that was a thing, and it kind of helped, and it was the beginning of trying to figure out what these are. And not to dismiss and discredit, but I think we have moved on so much now, and we don't. I feel like the generations have changed, and there's a lot of fragility. There is a lot of psychological fragility, and there's. I feel like pandemic has kind of triggered a lot of trauma in people and a lot of fragility. So therefore, I also don't believe we should leave people in their own experiences. Not to dismiss and discredit, like I said, Terence McKenna is a big voice in a lot of psychonauts that just adore him, and I can understand why. But I think it's time to move on and take a different approach, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that there are some people who are able to work with psychedelics on their own. But I have found, I mean, I've been in many ceremony spaces and I have seen many different journeys. And I have seen people on high dose of psilocybin become homicidal, right? And so, and when that happens, it's rare, right? But when that happens, you want someone to be there. You want someone to be there. And these medicines are really unpredictable. You don't always know, you never know actually where the medicine's going to take you, no matter how many times you've worked with it. And I think, and back to the question about the indigenous, it's a huge conversation. And there's in this, I don't like the word revolution, psychedelic revolution or psychedelic renaissance. I don't like any of that. I feel like what's happening in this space is that the indigenous traditions that have guarded these medicines and kept them sacred for such a long time, they're being erased. The whole culture is being erased, and not by everyone. There are people who are aware of what's happening. But what I see happening now in the psychedelic space is a lot of providers want to work with these medicines because they're so powerful, and they can see that it unlocks a lot of things, allows clients to go really deep, things can come out. But I see a lot of providers now really using these medicines as a tool. And I'm really referring to the plant medicines, the fungal medicines, the medicines that have a spirit and an essence, right? When we are working with these medicines, there is a lineage behind them. There is a lot that you can learn from elders in the community. And what's happening is that there are therapists that say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with the dosing. I don't want to deal with the medicine. I just want to do the therapy." And so they're missing the whole essence and spirit of the medicine, right? And that is a huge disservice to the client, right? To the medicine, to the whole entire container. Because if you're not honoring that, then you're really missing out, and you're using it. And it's not to be used. It's to be worked with. And so I really, when I sit in ceremony spaces, I'm very intentional about who I sit with, where that person has been, what is their lineage, what's their background, because it's also an energy exchange that's happening. You can't just go sit with anybody, right? There's a huge energy exchange that's happening in the space that I think not a lot of people are talking about. And yeah, I think this erasure of indigenous culture is really something that the psychedelic community can shift, right? But it's the education around that, what's happening, that's critical, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I am aware that there are loads of organizations that are supporting the indigenous work and the lineages and the protection of the teachings. So, but do you think that the way that the West is kind of coming in with full force, like you said, just wanting to take these medicines to heal overnight or to fix something, to, a little bit like the pharmaceutical approach, isn't it? Do you see any hope that, we can still preserve and protect and help and support the lineages, or even maybe bring and build some of that lineage ourselves? And because obviously not everyone can go to outside of our countries and be in those communities. So I don't know if you had any conversations around that. This has been on my mind for a long time.
Yeah, I really do believe that there are enough people who care about this to start shifting it, or to continue shifting it, to really shine a light on what's been happening. I think that for the people who aren't able to go abroad, there are many indigenous medicine keepers that come to the United States to hold ceremony. It's just a matter of finding them, and also there's something important to know, that just because you're indigenous doesn't mean that you're a sacred medicine keeper. Doesn't mean that you honor the medicine and the practices, because there's a lot of humanness and humanity that's in these spaces also. And so that's why it's really important to vet, I guess, to the best of your ability, who this person is. And sometimes that's hard when you're not really in a community. And so if anyone ever is wanting to know my thoughts on particular providers, I'm more than happy to share who I trust. So,
Yeah.
and I've learned a lot because I've been in spaces where I found myself that I don't trust it. And that was very early on in my journey. And then as I continue to find my people that I trust, then I find myself in their medicine family. And there's a lot of drama in medicine families. So there's a lot, I mean, the humanness really can seep through, but there is still a lot of light and goodness that you can find.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, definitely. I think it's going to take some time to find some more coherence, because I feel like it's all up in the air and so much is going on. And I'm hearing stories of re-traumatizations and maybe some abuse within these circles, and also which feels like sometimes like children just don't know what to do really, and they're just kind of learning, and in that learning, unfortunately, more issues can be, or more harm can be done. I actually have an indigenous teacher, and she said to me once, she said, it's almost hilarious that you guys in the West think that all indigenous facilitators are all sitting in the Zen sort of all love and light. They don't, and in some countries these medicines are used to create magic, black magic, and also intentionally harm one another. So it's not all love and light, she said. So
Correct.
that's the education that also needs to be, spread across these platforms. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's, the humans have the duality, just like the medicines have the duality of light and dark, right? You can work with the medicine for malice, or you can work with the medicine for medicine. And when you're communing with that medicine, I think it's really important to ask it, or to really help you guide it towards what it is that you are looking for. And some people use it for darkness. That's really a very obvious thing that I've learned really over the last at least 6 months. I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So it's good to put it out there as a disclaimer, and so that the listeners can be very careful and screen, and I guess do their research properly, and hear these conversations that all medicines isn't all about love and light, and there are really harmful things are happening also.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we bring the conversation back to the earlier one when you said a earlier thread of when you're screening? I'm really interested in the approaches that exclude, let's say, mental health disorders.
Sorry.
Or it's okay. Um,
Puppy barking. Go ahead.
for-
Go ahead.
so, for example, schizophrenic tendencies, bipolar, anything that could be quite serious. So at the moment, so I get sometimes emails, and I get people asking that they have these kind of people with these conditions in their families, and they have nowhere to turn to because we don't have enough research, we don't have enough data to know if this is right for them. And then turning to the traditional way of treating them is not also an option anymore because of, they don't want to be ending up institutionalized or all kinds of complications. So where do we stand here on this? Because I am also recognizing there is more and more people in that crisis. It's like more and more people are finding themselves in this existential crisis. We can call it spiritual emergency, or we can call it a psychiatric situation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I know that there are a lot of indigenous groups that will offer medicine to people who are suffering from schizophrenia and psychotic disorders, and really because I think that they believe that some of the fundamental issues that are going on are spiritual malady, and something at that level, and I think that I've spoken with Ataita actually about this, and that they don't turn anyone away with a psychiatric disorder. They will turn someone away if they're on medications, but if they have any underlying psychiatric disorder, they will work with them, but in a very different way. It's not like they'll come into the Maloka and drink 8 cups of medicine, and they treat it very differently, where it's a completely different approach, and it just needs more time and more care, and there's a lot of preparation. And then if they decide the person is in a place where where they can receive medicine, then they will give them a small dose and work very carefully with them. I think for a lot of the practitioners in the United States, it's because we don't know. We obviously don't want to do any harm. And so that's the most important thing for us anytime we're bringing someone into a medicine space. And so um, because there is a concern that it can worsen schizophrenia or mania, oftentimes those clients are not offered medicine. And so I think that because there's a risk, right? There's not just the risk that you're going to hurt someone, which is obviously the most important thing. You don't ever want to hurt anyone, but also there's liability, right? And when you're working with ketamine, you have malpractice, hopefully. But when you're working with other medicines, oftentimes you don't. I would say 99% of people who are working with psychedelic medicines, plant medicines, and whatnot in our country do not have malpractice insurance. And so that's also another reason why people are hesitant to bring someone into the space. But I know that they're working on it in research studies. So I think that if that comes out, that those clients are safe with these medicines, that I think a lot more people are going to be working with them.
Yeah, sounds good. It's a good news. It's a relief. I hear you. I understand that, of course, that there's a whole legal landscape that people need to navigate through. So I can understand we're not ready, even because how would you be protected if we're still dealing with the legal issues and
Right.
decriminalization and making a therapeutic tool? I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. So it's sad. I mean, sadly, we're probably going to need more time to get to those. I really need this medicine, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts. So the indigenous way of working with mental health is, I've always known that they look at it as a spiritual awakening or a shift in consciousness rather than a issue, rather than a psychiatric situation. So there's a lot to be learned here, I think. I know a nurse in the UK. He's a psychiatric nurse, and lately, especially in the last sort of year or so, he's been seeing, how people turn up to the A&E, the emergency room, so often every day, so many in big numbers. He said that this is also becoming similar in the psychiatric units as well. People are just kind of really in that, there's a high levels of crisis are being observed. So maybe that could be a good reason for us to also look at this situation and maybe find ways. That's my hope. Yeah.
And so you're saying in your friend in the UK, the people are coming in with psychiatric crisis from medicine or
Just in general. Just in general.
generally? Yeah, it's outrageous. What's going on is outrageous. It's outrageous. I mean, and it's the reality is that it's most people. It's most people. I mean, I don't know one person who doesn't have trauma, right? And some of them, you know, especially the veterans, right? The veterans that have had to do the most horrible things, like the moral injury that these people suffer from. It's and the suicide rate in that population is just astronomical. And these are people who gave up their lives, even if they didn't die, they still gave up their life because they're traumatized, right? And these are the people who gave all of that up for our freedom and for us to have this life, and we don't even take care of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
These are my friends, and my friends, you know, some of my best friends are in the military and have suffered just such horror and the things that they've seen and done, and they go to the mushroom and they go to drink medicine because nothing else is helping them. You know, I mean, you can take all the Prozac and all the things, right? And sure, maybe it may help you feel better 30% of the time. Maybe it works for people or less. But still, that person knows that all their stuff just got swept under the rug, and there's still a big lump under the rug, and you see it, and everybody sees it. And you know, the psychedelic medicines really allow you to lift up the rug and clean it out. And you know, oftentimes people seek out psychedelic medicines because they want this quick clean out, right? And sometimes it happens really quickly. Most of the time it does, right? But for most people, it's a journey. You're starting this journey, and you know, even the veterans. A lot of people think that when the veterans take medicine, that they're just dealing with their war trauma, but a lot of them go back to their childhood when they were abandoned by their parents. You know, it's the childhood stuff that all of us have. That you know, that it's that constant kind of like looking under the rug and cleaning out this big pile, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it really can be so transformative for people. I've seen it happen so many times, and what I keep coming back to is how our earth medicines are illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why we are having these conversations. This is why we're here, and to share and to spread the information, and hopefully people will be more informed. I had a hypothesis that the reason I think, you know, looking at the SSRI was the last thing that was developed about, what is it, 40 years ago? Nothing really has changed in the mental health department for a long time. And I believe it's because lack of understanding. There isn't much to be done, or we haven't been able to progress because it requires a serious commitment to really understand, to hold these people, because they're going to need a lot more holding. There's a lot of fragility, and I guess we don't have in the West, like our lives in the West, we don't have these foundations or environment to hold these people. A lot of people are isolated. So one of the things that I share and I hear, and I listen to a lot of the traumatologists, and they always talk about people who are going through a very deep trauma processing. They need a lot of holding. I mean, we're in a society where we can't even hold a friend's emotion or children acting out. So how are we going to deal with such deeper level of processing? So I think,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think it's all you know, there's this rampant disconnection, right? It's disconnected from everything. We're disconnected from our earth, the plants, the animals, the food that we eat, each other, ourselves. Like there is this huge just disconnection. And the psychedelics really work to, I mean, they are the connectors. They work to remind us of who we are. And really, I think that, yeah, it's just, I could talk about this for a really long time. Um, I really think that these medicines, you know, you need your community. And so I oftentimes go back to, I'm not sure how familiar 12 steps of AA, but I right now I'm in a year-long AA workshop, not because I identify as an alcoholic or someone who struggles with a substance use disorder, but because I have seen how it has saved people's lives. And I don't think it's just for people who struggle with alcoholism. I think that the entire 12 steps are what everyone needs, right? Taking an inventory, making amends, having a community, sponsoring someone who's struggling, like all of that should be for everyone. And I think that there's a role for the 12 steps, not just in the psychedelic community and therapy, but in therapy in general, and just in this in the human condition, and in helping to navigate this human condition. And yeah, so that's something that I'm really passionate about. But this rampant disconnection is rampant, and but it's the psychedelic medicines that really have the potential to bring us back together.
It is, and thanks for bringing the AA in. I think somebody that I've spoken to, she said it is not that all these addictive or people in recovery are gathering. It's just the whole idea is around building a lineage of wisdom that could be passed on. So like you said, the 12 steps can be the fundamentals for the psychedelic work too.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just put together a course. It's a free course that's on our website. It's working with the 12 steps in basically in navigating the human condition, and it's called Humanity Identified. So if anyone wants to take that, it's for free, and I think it's really helpful.
This is great. Thank you for sharing it, and also timely as we are coming to the end of our conversation. I was just going to ask you, where can they find you? Where can they look at the work that you're providing? And also, last words that you might be maybe you're itching to share with us. It'd be lovely to hear.
Yeah, anyone can find us at skylightpsychedelics.com. Our email is human@skylightpsychedelics.com. We have a phone number on our website. We're really trying to promote connection. And anyone can also take any of our training courses. So you don't have to be a therapist to take our training courses, but we only prescribe to licensed therapists who've taken the course. And in terms of anything that I want to share, just I really I've sat in a lot of ceremony lately, and I just can't stress the need for community and connection with other people. And it exists out there. And for anyone who feels isolated and alone, there is a community. You just have to find it. And I really believe that this life is a ceremony.
Thank you so much. So beautiful. Thank you. And thank you
you.
for all the work that you're doing. This has been very insightful, and hope to have you back very soon. We love having a returning guest. So looking forward to following up and catching up in the near future.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the work that you're doing. This is obviously so important, and I really appreciated being here with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. And thank you everyone for joining us. You will be able to find Dana's links and bio and all the necessary information in the show notes. Please do get in touch. Also comment and share your experiences, ask questions, don't be shy. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.